Tower endings are core to the Mortal Kombat experience, and the first thing I do once finishing the Conquest mode in one of these games is to go through the arcade tower with each character. I've finally finished this process with Mortal Kombat 1, and today, I'm going to be ranking each of the endings from worst to best. Mortal Kombat 1's endings mirror the approach for endings in Deadly Alliance and Deception, in that each one of them is possibly canon. They each build up the lore of the character the ending is tied to, and some seem to hint at the future of the franchise. It's been a hot minute since MK endings have been structured this way, instead focusing on the way each character theoretically finished the final boss of the game in each entry since MK9, minus a few exceptions of course. I'll be ranking the endings in terms of their presentation, lore, and character growth. Lore is going to be somewhat tricky to talk about considering we are now in the third timeline, but when appropriate I will juxtapose the characters in this timeline versus their previous versions. Additionally, I've split this list into 4 tiers: Bronze, Silver, Gold, and Platinum, each corresponding to the relative quality of endings within each section. With all of that established, let's rank them. Number 23.
While the regime had changed, little else had. My people still suffered in silence, ignored by the rest of Outworld. Though now I knew Empress Mileena's secret, that she was also afflicted with Tarkat. If anyone would help, it would be her. But how to get an audience? Syzoth. He was the Empress's new emissary to the Zaterrans. I asked him to introduce us. At great personal risk, he agreed. And as I'd prayed, the Empress was willing to meet. Even better, she would visit the colony. She was shocked to see how we lived. She moved quickly to provide for our care and comfort. Thanks to the Empress and Syzoth, we Tarkatans are no longer pariahs. Until our disease can be cured, that will do.
Tarkatans have been in Mortal Kombat ever since its second sojourn, and in that time, they function as a species of one-dimensional, bloodthirsty beasts. In Mortal Kombat 1, the Tarkatans are actually just Outworld denizens who have been infected with Tarkat, a virus that turns the infected into a rabid beast with arm blades. At first I was okay with this change since it opened the doors for this game to have some interesting conversations about the way societies ostracize people with illnesses that are misunderstood or mistreated. The United States did this with the AIDS epidemic after all. And reflecting real-world societal shifts like that in video games is always a plus for me. When media mirrors the real world like this, it allows us to contextualize and analyze real-world concepts in a virtual space. Think about the way that San Andreas approaches issues such as race riots, with it being heavily influenced by the LA riots of the 90s. Think about the way that all of these things are communicated through video games, and you can kind of see maybe what the developers were going with this subplot. That being said, Baraka's ending is not particularly amazing. He does an honorable thing trying to get fair treatment for his people, but the way he does it is completely different from the Baraka we all know and love. This is true of a lot of MK1 characters, since the game foundationally changes most of the cast from their traditional roots, shifting their origin stories, personalities, and motives. Sometimes this is good, as we'll see later, but in this case I think the reframing of Baraka is kind of bad. That, on top of the fact that his voice acting, while it's not bad and is befitting of the character, is just miserable to listen to. Baraka is one of the best MK characters, and if there is one thing Mortal Kombat 1 does well, is that they shift away from treating Baraka like a jobber, something that started in MK9 and continued all the way through MK11. This is just a consolation though. Number 22.
After escaping Lei Chin prison, I was hounded by the Imperial Police. I needed a place to hide and to recuperate while I plotted the best way forward. I knew the remote canton of my youth would be perfect. To escape capture, I traveled by sea. Little did I know that a gargantuan storm was brewing. My tiny craft was smashed apart. I closed my eyes, waiting to drown, hoping that the Netherrealm wouldn't claim my soul. But when I reopened them, I found myself not in hell, but on a deserted island. From its ruins, I could tell that great sorcerers had once lived there. In the caves beneath the ruins, I found what I can only describe as a well of souls. Once I learn how to wield its power, I will become invincible.
Someone at NetherRealm Studios really loves Shang Tsung. Starting with MK11, Shang has become one of the most powerful characters in the MK canon for reasons I don't understand at all. Before I dive into the ending, I need to talk about Shao Kahn and his relationship to Shang Tsung. Shao Kahn taught Shang Tsung everything he knows about soul magic.
You know nothing. He enslaves souls. He learned the black arts from the Emperor himself.
Making Shao Kahn and Shang Tsung two characters with the same powers. With this in mind, how exactly does Shang Tsung dunk on Shao Kahn consistently? In the original timeline, Shang needed the help of Quan Chi to assassinate Shao Kahn, which didn't even end up being him. Outside of the arcade ending, Shang Tsung has never competed one-to-one with Kahn, who is just a bigger, brutish version of Shang. So somehow I'm supposed to believe that non-Titan Shang Tsung survived the pyramid assault, somehow was lost at sea, and then ended up on an island that hosts ancient soul magic, with the assumptions being that he will absorb all the power and knowledge, becoming even stronger. Get the fuck out of here with that complete and utter rubbish. Number 21.
Quan Chi's defeat had cost me everything. For months I had furthered his plot, and now I had to start over. Saido's people were still in chains. That's when Rain approached me. On the run from Empress Mileena, he was desperate for help. And though I'd had my fill of sorcerers, this one was different. I agreed to provide him safe haven. He agreed to help topple Saido's government. And topple it we did. Rain summoned a wave so fast, so powerful, that it crushed the capital. Saido's fascist rulers were swept away. My people are finally free. They can chart their own course, needing only to follow their own desires. Their lives are now blessed by anarchy.
The 3D era of Mortal Kombat is consistently looked down upon in general discourse of the franchise, and it only seems to be recently that this is changing. I think the big change is that people who grew up with the PS2 games, like me, are now voicing our opinions about the 3D era. Characters from Deadly Alliance and Deception have been popping up in Mortal Kombat over the last few installments, with Bo' Rai Cho and Li Mei making an appearance in MKX, and Onaga having a cameo in MK11.
A more powerful enemy comes along and finds Earthrealm backed by Kung Lao.
MK1 brings this home, finally bringing back a lot of 3D era characters that have been too long absent from the franchise. Darius, Nitara, Shujinko, Li Mei, and Ashra are all back, and alongside them, the chaotic conquistador, Havik, returns. Havik is one of the more unique characters introduced in Mortal Kombat Deception, and over time he's become a cult favorite for fans of the franchise. Acting as a foil to Hotaru, Havik functioned as a representative of the Chaos Realm, something that doesn't appear to exist in modern Mortal Kombat. Havik's shtick has always been about using body contortions or masochistic manglings to fight his opponent, and he's never been better in this regard than in this outing. While I love Havik, and I welcome him back into the franchise with open arms, his place in MK1's story is lacking, and this lack shows up in his ending. Saido, the former realm of order, is now just a city in Outworld apparently, and Havik uses rain to drown the city, turning it into ruins. While this ending is good for Havik and it does introduce Saido again, I don't think the ending is that great. I would have much preferred something that introduced a conflict with Hotaru, something that could then be built up more in MK13. As it stands, Havik's side of the ending isn't as great as it could have been from a lore perspective. Number 20.
Quan Chi's plot collapsed. Along with it, my plan to secure new beings to feed my starving people. Because I'd advocated for partnering with him, I was held responsible. If I didn't seize for Viternus' new feeding grounds, the Coven would banish me. But then, I had a revelation. I didn't need to conquer realms to feed my people. I simply needed to capture enough beings to breed them. Once they multiply, Viternus will have a limitless, renewable source of food. And I only need a few thousand to start. A number so small compared to the billions in the realms that no one will notice as people go missing. But it will be more than enough to establish our breeding stock and feed a ravenous Viternus.
There's nothing wrong with Nitara's ending. Literally nothing at all. It's a good one for her, could be canon, and allows her enough motivation to participate in whatever the conflict in the next game is going to be. Based on this alone, her ending should be higher on my list, probably even all the way into the gold tier, silver at a minimum. But, and this is a huge but, Megan Fox's voice acting is absolutely, inexcusably awful. Like, what in the hell is going on over at NRS? How in the hell did Megan Fox audition for this role and get it over any amount of competition? They couldn't have found anyone with even basic competency in VA work? Nitara is a cool character and I'm glad she's back, but she has to be recast in the next game. Number 19.
As her reign began, Empress Mileena faced many challenges. To meet them, she turned to the people she trusted, her sister to lead her army, and me to lead her imperial police. Though I missed Empress Sindel dearly, I was glad my ties with her family had been mended. But while it was an honor to be made responsible for Outworld's internal security, I soon realized accepting the appointment was a mistake. I'm not cut out to be a bureaucrat, nor am I patient enough to navigate the Imperial Court's politics. I was at my best patrolling Sundo's streets, when I could feel the city's pulse and serve and protect its citizens directly. That's why I resigned my post and resumed my role as Sundo's first constable. I end each day knowing I've made a difference.
Li Mei is one of my favorite characters. In Deception, she was one of my favorite characters to play, and when I saw her confirmed for MK1, I knew I was going to play her. This Li Mei is as different from her original version as the new version of Sundo is from its original. This change is great though, and Li Mei's propensity to do everything to defend her home is on display in the remixed character. This puts her in a great place in the lore, but that doesn't mean her ending is groundbreaking. It's not a bad ending, but it doesn't build up Li Mei in any way or hint at what she's going to do in the sequel. Li Mei's endings have historically been a mixed bag, with her soul being taken by Shang Tsung in Deadly Alliance, and her being the wifey of a certain Dragon King in Deception. I don't even necessarily think either of these endings are outright bad, but they are inconsistent from a writing perspective. Deadly Alliances is somewhat canon, with her being saved by Bo Raicho right before her soul is taken, and in that way MK1 mirrors DA's a little. It's extremely likely Li Mei's ending is perfectly canon because it is so aggressively okay. It doesn't push any boundaries and it doesn't foundationally add anything to her character. If Onaga returns in MK13, it would be interesting to see if that Onaga love subplot would return. Maybe she will come to odds with Mileena's government, thereby going over to Onaga's side instead. I wouldn't hate that, to be honest, but only time will tell. Number 18.
After fleeing Outworld, I hadn't expected to return. But then I also hadn't expected the new Empress to make me an offer I couldn't refuse. To thank me for helping stop General Shao's rebellion, she asked me to be her emissary to the Zaterrans. Going home, bearing the seal of the royal house, I would show, once and for all, that my mutation wasn't to be feared. That it wasn't a source of shame. To my surprise, I was welcomed. But those warm smiles hid a dark secret. I stumbled upon a trove of official records, which showed that my shape-shifting ability isn't unique. Many Zaterrans are born with it, but are killed by their government to keep it from spreading. Who started this barbaric policy? Who is now enforcing it is unknown. But I will find out. And I will put an end to this madness.
The Zaterrans have ever only shown up in endings in MK history, and that holds true in MK1 as well. However, this game also has the added benefit of the Zaterrans having their own section of Outworld, something that just hasn't happened yet. I'm extremely happy to see Reptile getting a balanced and good ending for perhaps the first time since his MK2 ending. Reptile has always been a servant in MK lore, and that is kind of true about this ending too, except this time he is finally a servant of the good guys. He even gets a promotion in that he gets to be the throne's emissary to his people. Reptile's unique ability to appear human gives him a real double consciousness arc to his story, and I always like stories that explore this concept. I like the way it's done in Reptile's ending too, because of the evidence that some type of eugenics have been going on against his specific subspecies of Zaterran. This is the type of ending that could be hinting to a future plot point from MK13. If I were to speculate, I would say that maybe Reptile's Zaterran subspecies is killed, maybe because the ability to shift into a person is what allows someone like the Dragon King, Onaga, to take their bodies, but that speculation hinges on the lore around Onaga matching the original presented in Deadly Alliance. We'll have to see how it all pans out in 2028 or whatever when the sequel comes out. Number 17.
Though the barriers between timelines had been rebuilt, there was no question that they could again be broken. Protecting this timeline would require eternal vigilance, so that it could not fall victim to further outside aggression. But nothing in my countless lifetimes had prepared me for this task. In none of them had multiple timelines ever coexisted. Monitoring them for threats was an entirely novel problem. It would require a novel solution. I discovered that though the timelines no longer touched, their meeting had left them intertwined. I can now secretly surveil all timelines, keeping watch for potential danger. It pleases me to do this service for the new era. Lord Liu Kang may rest assured that it is secure.
I like Garrus way better after this game. In MK11, he was one of my least favorite characters, but the changes to his character makes him much cooler in this story. His ending is pretty good, and what I like most about it is that it insinuates that with MK13, maybe we'll finally be moving on past the timey-wimey nonsense of MK11 and MK1. With him monitoring the timelines, NRS has the ability to tell any type of story they want, since they'll be able to reboot it all again in 10 years or so, with the provision that Garrus interferes with something going on or another timeline is invading again. MK1's story is dreadfully awful, and my biggest hope is that this ending can start to undo a lot of the harm done by both MK11 and MK1 to Mortal Kombat's deep lore. Number 16.
My loyal partner had warned me. Reclaiming my power as Keeper of Time might have unforeseen consequences. In this, as in most things, he proved prescient. The process I had undergone did irreparable harm to my body. Taking back my power had cost me my immortality. While my lifespan would still stretch across eons, I would one day perish. And if the war with Titan Shang Tsung taught me anything, it is that this timeline is not safe without a protector. Yet I had never given thought to choosing a successor. Who is it that could replace me and protect my new era? The answer, of course, is Garrus. Tireless and meticulous, he is perfectly suited to be entrusted with this grave duty. And no one knows better the temptations of the hourglass. I have no doubt he will be above them.
Liu Kang's ending is a prequel to Garrus's, and I like it a little more than Garrus's because of a few details. Mainly, I like the way that this ending confirms Liu Kang is mortal once again, hopefully meaning that this era of timey-wimey nonsense is finally over. Honestly, the time travel based stories have been awful, with MK9 being the exception to the rule. I'm placing this ending in the middle-ish of this list because of this promise, and I really hope this ending is canon as a result. Number 15.
Kuai Liang and I were working hard to build our new clan. But even with the help of his close friend Harumi, it was difficult. The biggest problem was finding the right initiates. Then, one night, while walking outside Harumi's compound, I was attacked. I thought at first it was a Lin Kuei assassin, but his strikes were too uncertain, too angry. My attacker, it turns out, was a boy. Homeless and hungry, his assault was born of desperation. He needed money so that he could eat. It was like looking at myself 15 years ago. I would have ended up just like him if the Lin Kuei hadn't taken me in. So I took the boy to Kuai Liang, who also appreciated his fire. We made him our first initiate. The boy's name? Hanzo Hasashi.
We're going to be talking about Harumi later. I know she's in this ending, but she's not an important character for Smoke specifically, and we will be talking about the Shirai Ryu, her, and this timeline's Scorpion, Kuai Liang, later on this list. As for Smoke, this ending is okay, just like most of the endings in the middle of the list here. It's cool to see his relationship with Kuai Liang is still strong, since they were always really close friends in the original version of the timeline, but the most interesting part of this ending is perhaps the reveal at the end, Hanzo Hasashi. Hanzo Hasashi is the name of the original Scorpion, and at first I thought this character was just going to be deleted, which also created confusion for me during Raiden's ending, something we'll get into later. Him being a child when both Bi-Han and Kuai Liang are adults is going to be odd should this plot point be canon. It would be possible for Hanzo Hasashi to take the mantle of Scorpion, maybe in the next title, should that title be focused on Shujinko and his development over time. Shujinko's original story took several decades to play out, and that's also something that was odd about Deception's storyline. There were a lot of times where, even as a child, I was confused how mortal characters could still be young and alive by the end of Shujinko's story. When he met them as a child, decades passed. Making Hanzo a child here does give the writers a license to make the real Scorpion an appropriate age for the Deception storyline, and I do hope that that's what's being implied here by this ending. I also find it interesting how the aging of Hanzo here makes it possible for him to learn Scorpion's skills from Kuai Liang, and for him to be only a hair older than a potential Takashi Takeda in the next game. As it stands, this isn't a super impressive ending for Smoke, and that's why I'm putting it in the middle of this list, but it does present some interesting writing possibilities for MK13. Number 14.
No sooner had Titan Shang Tsung been defeated than Bi-Han and his loyalists hunted us down. Outnumbered, we fled to Japan. There, we sought refuge from an old family friend. As children, we played together. But Harumi Shirai was a woman now, the head of her clan. Her strength, beauty, and intellect awed me. Also incensed by Bi-Han's betrayal, Harumi agreed to help me forge a new clan, one that would stand against him and defend Earthrealm. Her aid proved invaluable, and as time went on, we grew closer. To honor Harumi and pay respects to my new bride, I named the clan after her, calling it the Shirai Ryu. Now the battle against my brother begins in earnest. The Shirai Ryu won't rest until Bi-Han is defeated and the Lin Kuei's honor restored.
Scorpion's ending brings the Shirai Ryu into Timeline 3.0's lore, and it does so in a super interesting way. This is crazy given the fact that Kuai Liang is not Hanzo Hasashi, yet both reside within the same timeline. Harumi is a character that has existed in MK lore since the very first game, with Scorpion's original ending alluding to the existence of a dead wife and child. That being said, Harumi is a character that we've never seen outside of her death sequence before in this franchise, and this ending presents the opportunity for the writers to make Harumi a playable character in MK13, something I'm super hyped for. This ending is also somewhat confirmed by the first Invasion season cutscene, with MK11 Scorpion getting angry that, in this timeline, the only one where Harumi still lives, she is with Kuai Liang rather than with a Hanzo of some kind.
The Scorpion invading our timeline also lost his wife and son to Quan Chi's murderous machinations. Consumed by grief, he searched them all to find another Harumi with whom he could rebuild his family. But in timeline after timeline, he arrived too late. Harumi was already dead. When Scorpion reached ours, he was crushed to find that, though alive, Harumi was wedded to Kuai Liang. Thwarted yet again, Scorpion's frustration exploded into rage. He has vowed to burn this entire timeline. If he cannot have Harumi, no one will.
I bet he was even more pissed when he learned that he existed in this timeline alongside Kuai Liang. You gotta feel for the guy a little, right? I also love the confirmation that the Shirai and Shirai Ryu is named that way because of Harumi's name. That's super interesting to me because the implication is that this nomenclature is consistent across all timelines where the Shirai Ryu exists. Number 13.
The battle had been lost, but the war isn't over. I won't stop fighting until I take Outworld's throne. That they thought Lei Chin Prison would hold me is laughable. Once free, I began planning my next campaign. I would need an unstoppable army to overthrow Mileena. Unfortunately, most of my former soldiers lacked the courage to rally to my standard. Rebuilding my army would require finding new recruits. And that task is proving easier than expected. Outworld's golden age has left more than a few behind. Without hope, without power, they eagerly heed my call to tear down Mileena's government.
General Shao is a pitiful shadow of Shao Kahn. Canonically, this makes more sense than the overpowered nature of Shang Tsung at least, because Liu Kang would have made him weaker and stupider in his timeline. I really dislike the way MK11 and MK1 have taken a dump on this character, and I do hope that the Shao Kahn of old can come back in some way. As it stands, Shao just shouldn't be a character in MK anymore because he's just so weak and basic now. Nothing about him is special beyond his potential place in the story of MK13. What I like about this ending is that it creates a nice potential plot point for future MK games. General Shao fighting against Mileena's government is a nice inversion of the typical way Shao's story plays out, and fundamentally changes his relationship with Kitana and Mileena in an interesting way. It's a good ending for Shao, and it's the only time in this game where he gets some kind of quote-unquote good thing happen to him. I also like how this ending builds up to Reiko's ending, something we will be getting into in a little bit. Number 12.
As the darkness enveloped me, I took a long last look at my family. I did not expect to see them again until their souls joined mine in the living forest. But miraculously, my beloved husband delivered me from oblivion. Though he couldn't save my body, Jared had preserved my soul. Like him and countless others, I am now a part of Ermac. Yet ours is not a peaceful repose. The collected souls within Ermac have their own needs and agendas. Before we can speak as one, we must first reach consensus. I had thought, as the former rulers of Outworld, I and Jared would hold sway. But here we are, two souls among many thousands, fighting for the right to be heard. And if there is one thing we do well together, it is fight. We will win the right to govern Ermac as we once had governed Outworld. And we will rule for the benefit of all.
Jared is a character that, like Harumi, is really only ever mentioned because of his death in previous Mortal Kombat games. Starting with MK9, there is a subplot in the franchise where Jared's soul is in Ermac's body, and he is able to take control of the entity Ermac, and that plotline is canon in MK1. Jared is able to come out on top within Ermac, and with Sindel's ending, she joins him in that conflux of souls. I like these characters being reunited canonically, and I like the way this ending opens up some more character development for Jared and Sindel in Ermac's future ending when that DLC drops later in MK1's lifetime. I've never really cared for Sindel, but this is a great ending for both her and Jared, and I am excited at the writing possibility created as a result of this ending. This creates a great chance for Ermac to have some of Sindel's moves in the next game, something that would diversify his moveset from Kenshi pretty well. Number 11.
To elude capture by Empress Mileena, I joined Havoc's crusade in Saido. There I summoned more magic than I thought possible, and drowned out the old regime. Havoc's longed-for anarchy had been achieved. He was more than satisfied. But I was left empty and broken. Had I been satisfied as Outworld's High Mage, not let myself be tempted by Shang Tsung, a great city would not now lay in ruins. I've caused devastation, ended thousands of lives, all because of my blind ambition. I've betrayed my oath, my sovereign, and my realm. These high crimes merit punishment, and I'll accept whatever the Empress gives me. My only ambition now is to one day be forgiven.
Rain has always been a traitor. That's literally the entirety of his character arc all the way through MK11, and he's never done anything other than betray whoever he's working for just so he can attain a higher level of power. Rain's ending is in the gold tier for me because it is the first time Rain has gone through a proper character arc in MK history. I like this character, but he's always been too one-dimensional, and I like the way this ending shows his capacity for remorse, appealing to Mileena for mercy. It is ambiguous how this ending actually plays out when the ending finishes, but I do like the idea of Rain willingly spending time in prison or working off his treason in one way or another. It adds a layer to his character, and layers like these are just good changes. Not many characters have a good time in MK1's remixing of MK lore, but Rain is on the list of characters where this second reboot has been a great change for his characterization. Number 10.
Until recently, I hadn't met Li Mei, but I had heard the stories. How the Umgadi's matron superior blamed her for not preventing Emperor Jared's murder. How she quit in disgrace rather than accept punishment. But those stories didn't fit the woman I now knew. Li Mei would never have been so negligent. Eventually, I uncovered the truth. The failures and mistakes which led to the Emperor's murder, they resulted from poor decisions made by the matron superior themselves. They made Li Mei their scapegoat. When the Empress found out, she wanted the Umgadi disbanded. But I convinced her that it could be reformed. To make sure it did, she put me in charge. I am humbled by this sacred responsibility. The Umgadi, my sisters, they are my life. I will not let them be brought down by the acts of a selfish few.
Tanya is another character like Rain that literally only ever did one thing: betray whoever she was supposed to be working for. Tanya in this game gets a glow up in her characterization, maintaining her fierce loyalty to Mileena. I like how the story mode does a bit of bait and switch with Tanya's portrayal. Anyone who's played a lot of Mortal Kombat titles would have immediately thought Tanya and Rain were betraying Mileena by putting her under Shang Tsung's knife. But that's not actually what's going on. Tanya was trying to save Mileena, her romantic love in this timeline. Tanya's ending is so high on my list because of the way that it portrays Tanya's now layered character, but I also like the way Li Mei is built up a little more. Li Mei is exonerated for failing to save Jared, which is somehow a better ending for Li Mei than her own ending. I've liked Tanya for a long time, and I'm happy that she's being portrayed in a more interesting way now. Number 9.
I had broken the Lin Kuei free of Liu Kang's enslavement. We were now masters of our destiny, and could take our place among Earthrealm's great nations. But taking and holding territory would require a vast army. I needed more fighters to make our presence felt. Then I recalled Shang Tsung's dragon warriors. An army of them would be unstoppable. But trafficking in such strong magic would surely draw Liu Kang's attention. Sector advised that we avoid detection by building our army using science, not sorcery. We've invested much into this endeavor, and we are beginning to see results. Once again proving the depths of Sector's genius. When we are done, all of Earthrealm will honor our desires and heed our demands. If not, they will face the Lin Kuei's wrath.
The original Sub-Zero is not a good dude, and he never has been. That being said, he never lived long enough in the original time to do anything truly awful, at least not until his resurrection into Noob Saibot. In this ending, however, we see Bi-Han begin the Cyber Initiative, something that he was never alive to see in the first or second timeline. Originally, it was Bi-Han's father who started the Cyber Initiative. Now the idea for the Cyber Initiative comes from Sector, meaning we might see him as a playable character in the next game. Because Bi-Han is backing the program, it actually opens up the possibility for MK11's Frost and Cyber Sub-Zero to both come back into the franchise for MK13, and I really like the story possibilities that are opened up by this subtle shifting of the lore around the Cyber Initiative. Because of the way Sub-Zero and Scorpion have shifted apart in this game, the changes to this element of Lin Kuei lore actually creates an opportunity for a Cyber Scorpion for the first time in the franchise, since Bi-Han would absolutely try to make Kuai Liang go through the Cyber Initiative, something that Kuai Liang can't seem to escape regardless of the timeline he's in. When it comes to reboots, I maintain the position that if you're going to change something in the lore, you should create opportunities for cool plot points. NRS did this with MK9 and MKX, only to cast them aside with MK11, and I hope they commit to the lore changes this time around. Number 8.
I wasn't looking for allies against the Yakuza, but I found one in Special Agent Jackson Briggs. He'd heard gangsters plotting to kill me on a wiretap and came calling, hoping I'd be his informant. We planned to part ways when we got the job done, but then Shang Tsung showed up to steal Sento. Needless to say, Jackson had questions. It blew his mind to hear that the stories in Johnny's movies were real. Once the shock wore off, Jackson quickly sized up the threats Earthrealm faced. To deal with them, he got his bosses at the FBI to form the Outworld Investigation Agency. When he asked me to sign on, I hesitated. After all, me? A government agent? But it's an important job. And more importantly to me, an honest living.
Kenshi is one of the best characters from the 3D era of Mortal Kombat. He's not my favorite from that era, but he's clearly been the community's favorite since he's the only one to show up from that time in the NRS era in more than one title. In Deadly Alliance, the game that introduced Kenshi, he is an operative of the Outworld Intelligence Agency, or OIA. This plot point doesn't show up in Deception or any other game of the franchise other than a little bit in MKX, and I'm hyped it's coming back in a prominent way. The OIA does a lot in Deadly Alliance, but beyond that, it is mostly irrelevant for the rest of MK's history, and I like the idea of it being more important and prominent organization this time around. This potential OIA subplot will create a lot of opportunities for the writers to integrate Earthrealm into the affairs of the Outworld Civil War that's being teased for the future. Anything that calls back to the 3D era of MK lore, specifically the sections of the story tied to Deadly Alliance and Deception, is great in my book. The 3D era has been ignored almost completely for the entirety of NRS's run with the franchise, and I'm happy to see it coming back in MK1. Here's to hoping the trend continues and we get to see Kenshi do some secret agent stuff in the next game. Number 7.
General Shao's revolt left Outworld's armies in tatters. We were vulnerable to enemies both foreign and domestic. That's why my sister asked me to take command, to stitch her military back together and purge Shao's loyalists within it. She trusted only me with the task. The soldiers, however, had little faith. They thought me a spoiled dilettante, unprepared and unfit to serve. That I could fight mattered little. All that mattered was that I wasn't one of them. I finally earned their loyalty by orchestrating an epic victory over Shao and his rebels. Though the general himself escaped, his forces were smashed. For as long as I am able, I will lead the Empress's armies in defense of Outworld. Through strength, we will achieve peace.
Kitana is no longer Kanem in MK1 and Mileena is. I do like the changes to Kitana and Mileena's characterization in this game, and the shift in their relationship puts Kitana in a more militant role. I like this because it places Kitana's role in the Outworld aristocracy to a similar place that it was in Deception. In Deception, Kitana was organizing Outworld's armies to defend against Onaga, and she would be replaced by Mileena at some point in the conflict. This ending places her in that position, and considering Reiko's ending, she might have to rally against the power of Onaga once again. Kitana the General has always been a cool idea, and I'm happy to see it come back. It was kind of in the series with MK11, but I do like the idea of her manning the battlefield again, like her ending implies. She and General Shao are going to have a great fight in MK13, and I can't wait to see it. Number 6.
I couldn't believe that Liu Kang welcomed me in Earthrealm, or that he thought me worthy to study with his Shaolin masters. After a lifetime of wishing for one, I finally had a home. But my joy was tempered as I thought about Serena. My shadow sister was still under Quan Chi's yoke, and she deserved a life free of him as much, if not more, than I. Quan Chi and my other sisters proved tenacious, but they were no match for my blade. I snatched Serena from them. Then Liu Kang helped me break Quan Chi's spell. Her mind free of his influence for the first time in years, Serena chose to join me in Earthrealm. My sister and I once again fight side by side, only now we do so for Earthrealm. Together, we have formed the Order of Light.
Ashra is one of the best characters introduced in Deception. She is a demon from the Netherrealm, but unlike the other denizens there, she seeks to free herself from the yoke of evil. How does she do this? In the most Mortal Kombat fashion possible. She does it by killing as many demons as possible. Each one she kills cleanses her soul a little more, shredding scraps of taint off with each fight. I love Ashra, and she's back in MK1 with dark and light powers in equal measure. This is a great ending for Ashra. Her being a part of the Wuxi Academy makes perfect sense, and I love how we can see Shujinko in the background of her first frame, alongside 2 other monks who might be Dairu and Kai. Serena is a character that is woefully underrepresented in MK games, and I like the way Ashra's story integrates Serena in a cool way. Serena being a playable character would be awesome, and I like the idea of her and Ashra both working together through the Onaga conflict. Both of them fighting against a Brotherhood of Shadow has me hopeful that this ending will be built up a little bit more in Quan Chi's future ending when the DLC releases. Endings like this one make me wish the cameo characters also got character endings, but that wouldn't make sense lore-wise with some of them, since characters like Sub-Zero, Scorpion, and Shujinko are all from the original timeline. Number 5.
It was inevitable that the Shaolin Masters had me join them. They knew just how much future initiates could learn from me. Shujinko was one of my earliest. His ability to absorb anyone's powers and skills was amazing. With the right training, he could become our greatest champion. I knew that I alone could give it to him. But as his proficiency grew, so did his ego. In love with himself and his power, Shujinko became a threat to the realms. He hadn't learned humility, because I wasn't the one who could teach it. I should have listened to Raiden's warning and not tried to train Shujinko alone. After he was subdued, Shujinko's accumulated abilities and memories were taken from him. He is once again a new initiate, ready to begin his training. This time, Raiden and I train Shujinko together. He will become the champion he is destined to be. And I will fulfill my duties, humbly and cooperatively.
I don't know when it happened, but at some point in MK's writing, Kung Lao became a one-dimensional character characterized exclusively by his arrogance. It may have been MK9 since that's how he is in that game, but it could also have been Shaolin Monk since he shows some evidence of that within that game. That's not how Kung Lao has always been though. In MK2, he was a proper monk like Liu Kang. In MK Gold, he was a big fan of the great Kung Lao, going so far as to attack Goro just for vengeance over Goro's killing of his ancestor from ages past.
could you attack now?
I once thought that an allegiance with an enemy was a lost cause, Princess Kitana.
Was that your attempt at an assassination, Earthman?
No, that was a ceremonial strike of revenge for my ancestor that you killed in Mortal Kombat so many years ago.
In Deadly Alliance, he's remorseful for the death of Liu Kang and reverent, something modern Kung Lao could never be. He used to be one of my favorite characters because of Deadly Alliance and Shaolin Monks, but I've not been a big fan of Kung Lao's portrayal over the past 10 years. That being said, MK1 begins to show elements of Kung Lao's character growth. For the first time in a long time, in this ending, he learns humility through failure, and this is great. I'm excited for the first time in a long time to see what NRS is going to do with this character moving forward, and I really hope that they commit to the growth exhibited in this ending. That alone would be enough for this ending to show up in the gold tier, but Shujinko takes the ending even further. Shujinko is literally one of my favorite characters ever made in Mortal Kombat, and he finally has a good cameo in an NRS ending. We see him being trained by Kung Lao, something on its own that isn't special, but Shujinko has his power-stealing ability. This is significant because that's an ability he only gets because of the incorporeal spirit of Onaga gifting him with it, which implies that Onaga is conspiring to return at last. Onaga is my favorite MK villain, and the potential for his return alongside Shujinko in the franchise is possibly my favorite thing about MK1. Originally, Shujinko was trained by Bo Raicho, and I like the idea of him being trained by Raiden and Kung Lao. This would be a pretty cool change, and it might make Shujinko an even better character than he already is. Number 4.
Were it not for my godly counterpart, I would not have survived the battle against Titan Shang Tsung. Meeting him, though, raised questions. Why did I replace him in this new era? Why was I made mortal? Lord Liu Kang told me of his Raiden's nobility and righteousness, about his steadfast leadership in the defense of Earthrealm. He also told me about Raiden's dark side, how he could be consumed by rage and cast aside the rules he otherwise lived by. Making me mortal and incapable of such anger was to keep me from following in his footsteps. Though I understood the reasons why, I felt I had been done a disservice. To survive the coming battles, I may need the edge that only great rage can bring. As the Shaolin couldn't aid me, I sought out someone who could. Someone to stoke the fire within me and teach me to master it. For this, I could have no better teacher than the Shirai Ryu's Grand Master.
Kuai Liang might be Scorpion in this timeline, but he is not Hanzo Hasashi. He does not have the same well of rage that Hanzo does because he did not have to witness the murder of Harumi and his children. This means that the implication at the end of this ending makes no sense because Kuai Liang never showed any evidence of rage over the course of MK1's story, nor should he. This part of the ending is even weirder since Hanzo Hasashi is in this timeline as well, albeit as a child. If that's all this ending was, it would be in the bronze tier, but that's not all this ending brings to the table. Liu Kang's Raiden meets the original Raiden, and from there, he learns Raiden's history as protector of Earthrealm and as Dark Raiden. Liu Kang never knew anything about Dark Raiden from Timeline 1.0, which makes me think that he doesn't know anything about the resurrection of Onaga either. This is important because Mortal Kombat is a self-reverential and referential franchise, and I suspect that there's a good chance the Deception storyline is going to be revisited or at least touched on in the next game. Dark Raiden premiered in that game as a result of original Raiden's conflict with the Deadly Alliance and Onaga. Raiden's claim that he might need the power of rage in the future is great, and maybe we'll see the return of Dark Raiden in the next installment, and maybe NRS will stick to the bit this time. Dark Raiden is such a great side to that character, and I'll be forever disappointed that MKX spent all of that time building up to the birth of Dark Raiden just for Kronika to erase him 10 seconds into MK11's story. This ending is so high for me because of the promise of Dark Raiden's return.
Shinnok was an elder god, impossible to kill. There are fates worse than death.
Number 3.
Though worried about how the public might react, I met with Baraka to discuss his Tarkatans. Speaking from his heart, he moved me. I agreed to visit his colony and see how his people lived. The conditions were atrocious. This was one of my mother's few mistakes. Like all Outworlders, she treated Tarkatans with scorn. What they deserved from us was compassion. And the only way to get it for them was to reveal my affliction. To show all my subjects that even an empress could get Tarkat. The scandal my revelation caused was intense. But with the help of Kitana and Tanya, I emerged from it a stronger empress than ever. My honesty, empathy, and resolve won over my remaining doubters. There is no longer any question that I am fit to lead the Empire.
Mileena's ending does what Baraka's was trying to do. Mileena, the Empress infected with Tarkat, reveals that she's infected to generate understanding among her people. This causes problems though, leading to some dissension in the rank and file of the Empire, possibly leading to General Shao's ability to garner support in the Wastes. Mileena's changes in this game are the perfect example of how a person's background can fundamentally change who they are. Mileena in this timeline is part of a close-knit family, has a close romantic relationship with Tanya, and is not made to be an outcast due to her Tarkat infliction. These are all important towards creating a character who is empathetic and fair, which she is in this timeline. Juxtaposing this Mileena with her last canon appearance in MKX, they are night and day condoms. I love Mileena. She is my second favorite character, and she has been ever since the Deception days. This whole plot point with the Tarkat disease and creating understanding within the Empire is reflective of real-world issues with the way that we create us versus them paradigms within our own society. As I said during Baraka's ending, I love it when media has the conviction to make statements about the real world within its fictitious one, and I think that's what the writers at NRS are doing with Mileena's subplot here. Number 2.
Since this whole thing kicked off, I'd wondered why Liu Kang chose me to be a champion. I mean, sure, I was killing it as a martial arts star, but it's one thing when it's all for show. It's different when you're playing for keeps. Then Liu Kang let me in on his master plan. He wanted the masses to know about the world beyond them, the one filled with gods and monsters, and he wanted me to tell him about it. But I knew revealing the truth all at once would be too shocking of a plot twist for most. That's why I pitched doing a bunch of stories, to slowly get people used to it. And if there's one thing I can do, besides kick ass in combat, it's build a cinematic universe. I'm serving up movies, streaming series, games, you name it. I like that I'm doing a public service, and it doesn't hurt that I'm making more than a few bucks. It's the kind of synergy that would make any studio mogul proud.
Johnny Cage's endings have to do with him becoming a director most of the time, and this ending is no different, except this one adds an element to his prototypical story. Cage creates a multimedia cultural monster, creating a cinematic universe with games and books on the side for the true history of Mortal Kombat. I like the way Liu Kang created Cage as a filter by which to share the truth of the realms with every citizen in Earthrealm. It shocks me there aren't many Mortal Kombat movies. I've seen them all, and I would say the 1995 original is the only one that's good. It's crazy to me that no one's thought to make a Mortal Kombat cinematic universe because there's so much lore to the franchise. It would make a cinematic universe easily if it had the right writing team. Imagine if the first film had its own movie, but then there was a setup film or two leading into MK2 and so on and so forth. I would see every single one with the same fervor I had for the MCU before Endgame had finally come out. I love the implication that Cage does just this, and that's what he was made to do. I don't know why it is, but I always find these director Cage endings so funny, and they typically place pretty high for me in my rankings of endings. Number 1.
With General Shao freed from prison, we began raising a new army against the royal family. Though many were eager recruits, few were good at soldiering. It was so bad, the general was forced to change tactics. He decided that we needed a doomsday weapon. That weapon isn't a thing, though. It is a monster. Onaga, the Dragon King. The general told me the old legends were true. That his ancient ancestor defeated Onaga, trapping him deep inside Mount Sagan. The Dragon King is still there today. His pent-up fury waiting to be unleashed. Because Onaga is so dangerous, the general wouldn't risk trying to tame him before. But now, he feels we have no choice. Though I likely won't survive, I accept this mission gladly. I can think of no greater honor than to give my life in the General's service.
My favorite ending in Mortal Kombat 1 is Reiko's, but it is not because of Reiko himself. This is probably the best version of Reiko we've ever seen, and I do like him as a character in this game, but on the back of his characterization, the awesomeness of this ending does not lie. It lies on the strength of Onaga, the Dragon King, getting his first good cameo appearance in an ending. This ending is the primary reason why I suspect Onaga of being the main villain in the next Mortal Kombat game. This suspicion is the reason why this ending is my favorite too. Onaga is 100% my favorite villain in Mortal Kombat lore, and I have been waiting since the credits rolled in MKX for his return, which was almost 10 years ago now. There are some massive changes to Onaga's return implied in this ending. Firstly, he's much older than in the first timeline. In the first timeline, he was betrayed by Shao Kahn, and that's how Shao Kahn became Emperor of Outworld. Shao Kahn, the canonically strongest villain in the Timeline 1.0 Mortal Kombat, could only beat Onaga with treachery and trickery. And that Onaga was just a man, as he wouldn't get his dragon body until Reptile was forced to act as a host for his soul. The fact that Onaga has been in this new timeline the whole time is fantastic to me, and because Liu Kang wouldn't know anything about the power of the Dragon King, I fully believe that this threat would have slipped under his radar in ways that Shang Tsung, Quan Chi, Shao, and Shinnok were never going to be able to. I think Reiko succeeds in subduing this weakened Onaga, and the Dragon King is going to be used as a weapon against Mileena's Khanum. I couldn't be more hyped for the potential storyline this presents, making this my favorite ending in Mortal Kombat 1.
Long live the Dragon King.
And that's the video, guys. Whew. This was a big old chonker of a list today, so if you made it this far in the video, thank you. If you liked what you saw, please like, share, subscribe, and ding that bell for more really chaotic gaming content. Have a great day, gamers.